Hey, I'm Stelter, and it's time for Reliable Sources. This is our weekly look at the story behind the story, of how the media really works, how the news gets made. Ahead this hour, 3 White House correspondents analyzing Trump's decision to keep visitor logs from the public and his move to counter-program the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Hey, once a reality show star, always a reality show star, right? But the biggest media story of the week, one of the biggest of the year, is the sudden downfall of the man behind me, Fox News Channel's biggest star, the swift cancellation of Bill O'Reilly's show. For O'Reilly, the spin stopped here.
I grabbed some vacation because it's spring and Easter time. Last fall, I booked a trip that should be terrific. Not going to tell you where it is, but we have a contest on BillO'Reilly.com. Guess where Bill's going? I'll have a full report when I return.
But he is not returning. While O'Reilly was on vacation, the men who control Fox News, the Murdochs, had an outside law firm investigate new allegations of harassment by O'Reilly against women in the workplace. We don't know exactly what the law firm found, but it was enough to dismiss O'Reilly. This was unthinkable 3 weeks ago. But it turns out even O'Reilly was not too big to fire. Later this hour, we'll broaden out and examine the toxic culture that Fox News boss Roger Ailes created. CNN's Allison Camerata will speak with me about the harassment she says she experienced in Roger Ailes' office. While this week was in some ways about O'Reilly's end, it was also a new beginning. It was a beginning for victims of harassment in the workplace, a feeling that these issues are now finally being addressed. Here are what some of the O'Reilly accusers said on television this week.
I have been warned by numerous people that he had engaged in sexual harassment with them. I felt like I needed to take a shower afterwards. He undresses women with his eyes.
As I was getting off the elevator, he said, "Looking good there, girl." And he would always come around my desk, leer at me, look me up and down. I'm sitting there minding my business, and he walks past and says, "Hey, hot chocolate."
And then he caught up with me and said, no, come back to my suite. At that point, he became hostile, and then he spent some time weaning me off the show and getting his executive producer to cancel me.
Bill O'Reilly is being paid $25 million on the way out the door. There's lots of speculation about what he may do next. But let's keep the focus on these accusers as well as on the choice by the Murdoch family to dismiss O'Reilly. Joining me now to discuss this, my all-star panel, Emily Steele, one of the reporters at the New York Times who discovered the secret harassment payments and ultimately led to O'Reilly's departure. And next to her, Jamia Wilson, Executive Director of Women Action in the Media, and Sarah Ellison, a special correspondent for Vanity Fair. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Emily, I was saying that you had a big part in this. Do you feel you did? Your story came out on April 1st detailing secret settlements between O'Reilly and these accusers. Now here we are 21 days later and he's out of a job.
What is your question?
Do you feel you played a big part in that?
What I think happened is these payments, these settlements, these allegations against Bill O'Reilly were secret. Nobody knew about them. The company had helped protect him. Bill O'Reilly himself had struck these agreements so that nobody would learn about this. And I think what our reporting did was expose what these women have said had happened and the company's cover-up and the protection of Bill O'Reilly.
Cover-up. There was a cover-up.
There was a protection of him, yes.
So Gretchen Carlson sued Roger Ailes last summer. We all know what happened next. Ailes resigned. Gretchen was paid $20 million. There was a public apology. Is that when you started looking into O'Reilly?
Yep, that's when it was in the summer we had started to look into what happened with the Andrea Macris dispute from 2004, when a woman who was a producer on Bill O'Reilly's show came forward with allegations against him. And we looked at that scandal. In the course of our reporting, we found that there were other women who also had allegations against Bill O'Reilly and who also had reached settlements after reporting inappropriate behavior by him.
Take us behind the scenes. How did you find these other women?
So a lot of that we can't talk about, Brian. A lot of it's our reporting. But what I can say is we have talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of people, and we also did a pretty thorough analysis of the people who had appeared on Bill O'Reilly's show, and that was a good place to start of people who to talk to.
You're saying some of this was hidden in plain sight. It was on O'Reilly's show. You analyzed who was appearing on his show regularly and then reached out to those women.
I wouldn't say that a lot of this was hidden in plain sight. A lot of what we unearthed were that there were these 5 settlements with women who had reported allegations about his behavior.
Right.
And those settlements were designed to never become public. They had ironclad confidentiality agreements. With one of them that we actually viewed, if there was any infringement, then there would be a $500,000 violation for each infringement. So these settlements were not designed to be discussed, to be made public. And that's what our reporting showed.
Now, here we are 21 days later. Did you expect that O'Reilly would be out of a job 3 weeks after your story was published?
You know, it was at the time when the story was reported, it was really hard to tell. There was this track record of the company's protection of him. The company itself was the one that struck the deals with 2 women in the months after Ailes' departure. And in addition, what we know is the company reached a new contract with Bill O'Reilly this year, and that was a 4-year deal worth $25 million a year. And at the time they struck that contract, they knew about at least some of the allegations against Bill O'Reilly.
And that really brings us to the Murdoch, Sarah. You've been covering the House of Murdoch for many years. What do you make of this choice to renew his deal in March, knowing Emily's story was in the works, and then to cancel him in April?
Well, the one thing I would differ with Emily on is we knew about Andrea Macris, right? We knew about that settlement. And
that was the one we knew about.
That was the one that we absolutely, had been reported on, and that was back in 2004. So even while the Ailes situation was going on this summer, we knew that there were other things that were sort of there. I think that what the difference was this time around is that the sons, James and Lachlan Murdoch, had sort of opened up this new avenue. They had hired an outside law firm. They had decided that they were going to say to their own employees, we take these things seriously. And so once you put an outside law firm there, once you have a hotline that people actually can call, it really takes the genie out of the bottle. And the question for them now, and I think that one of the reasons why O'Reilly was separated from the company and why he's gone is that the company really knows that there are other women there, and there would be a continuous drip of other people who are going to come out. Now, we're going to see those other people still come out, but at least they'll be able to say, well, we've taken, very strong action. The question for the Murdochs and for the sons specifically as they've taken this new stand is, how deep do they really want to go?
So the confluence of events here that we're describing is the initial New York Times investigation by Emily and Michael Schmidt, then advertisers withdrawing ads from the O'Reilly Factor, other women coming forward, calling the hotline, partly thanks to attorney Lisa Bloom, who was leading the way as an activist on this. Other organizations, Jamia, like Color of Change, also creating pressure in the company, and then internal pressure within the big Fox media company, employees uncomfortable with O'Reilly. Jamia, what do you make of the ad boycott element of this? What does it tell, perhaps liberal groups or advocacy groups that want to see something like this in the future? Is this a roadmap for the future?
What it tells us is this roadmap that was started by our ancestors works. Economic solidarity and action from women of color, women-led groups, and people of color-led groups works. And when we work together in diverse coalitions, we can make things happen. We can win.
That it was one important piece. Let's take a look at what Bill O'Reilly has said about this topic. In 2004, he was on his program discussing this idea about women making harassment claims. Here's what he said at the time.
I think that the sexual harassment thing is used as a club, as I said, by many women. All right? It's something they have against men, a threat to keep men at bay in a very competitive marketplace.
That's what he said around the time of the Andrea Macris situation. Now, his defense has some echoes 13 years later. Let's put on screen part of his response on the day he was ousted from Fox News. He said, it is tremendously disheartening that we part ways due to completely unfounded claims. Jamia, your reaction?
My reaction to this is that it's not really surprising given the fact that typical abuser behavior is such that gaslighting and harassment intimidation are often used to discredit people who might have less power and status due to social dynamics or also positional dynamics within a workforce. And so him casting doubt and undermining the voices of people who shared their experiences with harassment actually aligns with the habit and practices and the patterns of power imbalance and exploitation within Fox's culture. And with denying those claims, I think that that's another example of saying that the women who stepped forward weren't telling the truth and trying to shirk responsibility and cast blame instead of changing a culture to one that makes it a fair and equal workplace for all.
That's your take. His view is he's a victim and he needs to say he's a victim. I wonder, Sarah, let me be a little bit cynical here. In order to stay employed, keep selling books, find a show on another network, Doesn't O'Reilly have to keep denying this? Doesn't he have to keep arguing that this was completely unfounded all along?
Well, I think that that's certainly his position. He's backed up by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who defended him right after Emily's story came out, saying that I don't think he did anything wrong. And I think that this gets to a larger question of some of this. If you look at Fox, if you watch Fox News and you see, for example, Gretchen Carlson this summer, there were examples of what her co-host Steve Doocy was saying to her. You've seen Bill O'Reilly make statements on air that some people find really offensive. And I think that he can say, this is unfounded. This is just the way men talk. This is just the way things are. And I think that he certainly will continue to defend himself, and he sees, you know, other opportunities for himself in the future.
And what do you think he'll do now? I mean, he's got a podcast. It's back on Monday. Maybe he'll talk about this tomorrow on his podcast?
I'm not sure he's going to go that far into this.
We don't even know if he can legally.
Well, I think that he probably can't really continue to defend himself, saying that these are untrue. But I think that this is the continued war against PC culture, men being victimized by, you know, minorities and women. I mean, this is all sort of a piece.
Emily, do you have that same sense that this was instantly political? The moment your story came out, this became politicized?
You know, it did. And Sarah noted that a couple of days after the story, the Times did an interview with Donald Trump in which he defended Bill O'Reilly. And as soon as the President of the United States is defending a character, it becomes a political issue.
So last question for you. What does your gut tell you about what O'Reilly will do next?
You know, I think that really remains to be seen. He was on this perch at Fox News for 20 years. That's a very long time. And I really don't know what's going to come next.
Maybe he doesn't know.
Right. I mean, he has these best-selling books. He certainly has a platform of his own. Fox News isn't as dominant as it used to be. It's still the #1 cable channel, but there are all kinds of other outlets that exist. So he's probably figuring that out now. You
know, when he came back, when he planned to come back from vacation on Monday, he was going to announce his next Killing book on his show on Fox. You know, he has this best-selling line of books, Killing Reagan, Killing Patton, etc.
Right.
He was going to announce the next one on his air. You have to wonder how this is going to affect his book deals and things like that down the line. Thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. Coming up next this morning, a woman coming forward for the first time, detailing Roger Ailes' behavior, the culture of harassment at Fox. Hey, I'm Brian Stelter, and it's time for Reliable Sources. This is our weekly look at the story behind the story, of how the media really works, how the news gets made. Ahead this hour, 3 White House correspondents analyzing Trump's decision to keep visitor logs from the public and his move to counter-program the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Hey, once a reality show star, always a reality show star, right? But the biggest media story of the week, one of the biggest of the...
Like I needed to take a shower afterwards. He undresses women with his eyes.
As I was getting off the elevator, he said, "Looking good there, girl." And he would always come around my desk, leer at me, look me up and down. I'm sitting there minding my business, and he walks past and says, "Hey, hot chocolate."
And then he caught up with me and said, no, come back to my suite. At that point, he became hostile, and then he spent some time weaning me off the show and getting his executive producer to cancel me.
Here is the sudden downfall of the man behind me, Fox News Channel's biggest star, the swift cancellation of Bill O'Reilly's show. For O'Reilly, the spin stopped here.
I grabbed some vacation because it's spring and Easter time. Last fall, I booked a trip that should be terrific. Not going to tell you where it is, but we have a contest on BillO'Reilly.com. Guess where Bill's going? I'll have a full report when I return.
But he is not returning. While O'Reilly was on vacation, the men who control Fox News, the Murdochs, had an outside law firm investigate new allegations of harassment by O'Reilly against women in the workplace. We don't know exactly what the law firm found, but it was enough to dismiss O'Reilly. This was unthinkable 3 weeks ago, but it turns out even O'Reilly was not too big to fire. Later this hour, we'll broaden out and examine the toxic culture that Fox News boss Roger Ailes created. CNN's Allison Camerata will speak with me about the harassment she says she experienced in Roger Ailes' office. While this week was in some ways about O'Reilly's end, it was also a new beginning. It was a beginning for victims of harassment in the workplace, a feeling that these issues are now finally being addressed. Here are what some of the O'Reilly accusers said on television this week.
I have been warned by numerous people that he had engaged in sexual harassment with them. I felt